Hello again and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Imperial Guard Tactics video, and today guys we're going to be talking about the best meta loadouts for your Sentinels right now. Now some of you might be thinking, are Sentinels even meta? Yes, they are. Very simple reason why you're going to want to consider Sentinels is the fact that with the new CP situation in Nephilim, you are going to need to think of ways of getting Sentinels into your list if you're wanting to take a brigade, because you need those 3 fast attack choices. And a lot of times the fast attack choices can be fairly weak in the Guard army. You could be looking at Hellhounds, but they're kind of expensive. They've got pretty bad damage out, but I did a video on them recently about them being a bit of a trap unit. And so for me, the one choice that really is available to us when it comes to taking cheap brigades to get as much CP as possible is the Sentinel. Now there's 2 varieties of Sentinel you can pick from, and we're going to be covering both of them, the pros and cons, very quickly, but also we're going to be looking at what loadouts are best for each type of Sentinel that you are considering. Now without further ado, let's dive straight into today's video. Now, as per the latest points updates, it doesn't really matter what you take your Sentinel with because it costs 40 points. Is it a Scout Sentinel? Is it an Armor Sentinel? Does it have a Lance Cannon? Does it have a Multi-Laser? It doesn't matter. It's 40 points. So previously, one of the arguments I used to make for taking Sentinels is you want to take them as cheap as possible, stick a Multi-Laser on them. They have one job, which is either be attacks or to be a deep strike screen. But now that has changed because Lance Cannons are basically free now. So when it comes to picking the loadouts for your Sentinels, we actually get a little bit more choice, a little bit more variety, and it's a little bit more interesting. Now, the first thing to mention is what variant should you take? Scout Sentinel or Arm Sentinel. And really it comes down to how many Sentinels you're going to take in your list, and linked to this is their intended battlefield role. So what do we mean by battlefield role? Essentially we're talking about, are the Sentinels going to be a source of firepower? Are they going to be achieving some quite good stuff in your list? Or are they going to be simply a tax unit that you're taking to fill up the brigade? Now, let's explore that first option. Okay, you want to take more than just 3 Sentinels and individual squadrons to fill out that fast attack choice. You want to be a source of firepower. There are better sources of firepower, but Sentinels are quite cheap. They're quite cheap for their durability, with armor and contempt, all that kind of stuff. If you're going down the route of, I want my Sentinels to do stuff, then you're going to want to look at Armored Sentinels. Armored Sentinels are surprisingly durable for their points cost. It's 40 points, it's toughness 6, it's got 6 wounds, it's got 3 per save, it's got armor and contempt. It's actually quite good. And so what you want to be thinking about is, okay, I've got this durable unit, what do I want to do with it? Well, one thing that we've been experimenting with recently is taking them as a can wall. And what that means is you're going to have them pushing forward, screening your infantry out so you can not only take an objective, but you can hold it. The opponent's going to have to chew through these 18 armor contempt wounds before they get to the infantry behind you. Now, that's pretty good, and to do that, the loadout that I'd recommend in this case is you want to be looking at squadrons of 3 Sentinels, maxed out 3 Sentinels. You want at least 2 squadrons of them. You might want 3 squadrons of them, go all in. And you're probably going to want to give all of those Sentinels things like heavy flamers. And the reason for that is they're going to be pushing up. More than likely, they're going to get trapped in combat at some point. You won't necessarily be able to desperate break out all of them. And so you're going to have to accept the fact that these Sentinels might be stuck in combat, sort of flaming away, having to do stuff. And so flamers are great for that because it means that essentially they can do something in close combat rather than trying to prang a single las cannon shot into something or autocannons which never do anything. However, I would say that the Armor Sentinel can wall is a little bit of a niche tactic. It's favoured by some players. I quite like it myself, but it's not something that everyone can afford to do literally with real money or with points in their list. I mean, that is going to be taking up 360 points in your list. That is the equivalent of taking a tank commander and a half. You may simply just not have the points to squeeze into it. So what you find is probably the more common way people use Sentinels is Scout Sentinels to fill out brigades. Now, how do we want to fill our Scout Sentinels? How do we want to load them out? How do we want to use them in the brigade? Now, traditionally, cheap as possible, multi-laser, that was the way to go, but as mentioned, doesn't need to be a factor anymore because a las cannon costs the same much as a multi-laser. So for me, there's 2 routes that you want to go down with Scout Sentinels for filling out brigades. First route you want to consider is giving them a heavy flamer, because they are more than likely going to be scout moving forward, and so there's nothing wrong with doing a 9-inch scout move and then a 9-inch regular move and then starting to flame people with a 12-inch range heavy flamer. That could actually be quite a good harassing little unit, and if the opponent decides to charge it, then you get a little bit of overwatch with a heavy flamer. If the Sentinel ends up getting wrapped and trapped, which it can do, and let's say more than one gets wrapped and trapped, so you can't desperate break out them all, then the heavy flamer, as previously mentioned with the Armored Sentinel, can do something for you. However, I tend to find that the Scout Sentinel is pretty fragile. It's 1 less toughness than its armoured cousin, and it is also 1 less save. Armor contempt for a 4 save isn't great. It's not bad, but it isn't great. So what you tend to find is that if you scout move your Sentinels forward, then they're going to get picked off pretty easily. And you might just be giving away some bring it down points. At the end of the day, they are going to be giving away 1 bring it down point each. So whilst it might seem like heavy flamers with Scout Sentinels are the natural companion, short-range weapon that can scout move forward, match made in heaven, right? Well, I have a bit of a big brain move here, okay, guys? Not a smooth brain move, big brain move. Okay, hear me out. I think Scout Sentinels with lance cannons are better, and this is why. Scout Sentinels are so fragile that if you scout move them forward against most opponents, unless you're denying a turn 1 deep strike, and there are multiple armies that can turn 1 deep strike. Grey Knights, Thousand Suns, Tau, they can all turn 1 deep strike, and that could be a real problem. Okay, so Scout Sentinels, I think, actually provide, not only are they attacks to fill out your brigade, but I think they actually provide great counters to some armies that Guard can traditionally struggle with, because you just get penned in your deployment zone, you can struggle to get out. So Scout Sentinels, I think, can really counter that. The number of times that I have used Scout Sentinels against Grey Knights, and I can tell you, hands down, I won the game because the Scout Sentinels pushed them back, is an uncountable amount. Literally every single time I faced Grey Knights, I've never struggled with them. When Grey Knights were at their peak, and people were saying they were broken over the top, because Grey Knights always get 3 months of being over the top every edition, I had never struggled with them, and I never lost to them. Okay, just because of my Scout Sentinels. And same with Thousand Suns. I lost Thousand Suns because I did turn 1 deep strike army with multiple teleports. I started taking Scout Sentinels, pushed them back. Same with Tau. Tau were using that whole stealth suit thing where they bring them down. I pushed them back with Scout Sentinels. They couldn't do it anymore. You know, if you want to deep strike your crisis suits out in the middle of nowhere, go for it. Go for it. So Scout Sentinels are really, really good, and they're not just attacks unit. But the problem you tend to find with them is if you aren't pushing the enemy back, if you're not pushing that turn 1 deep strike, then scout moving them forward is actually a bit of a liability, especially if you're facing like a combat army. Because if you scout move your Sentinel forward, then you're not pushing the enemy back. In fact, you're helping them leap forward, because the enemy might move, and then if you hadn't scout moved your Sentinels, they'd be stuck out in the open. But because you have scout moved them, they then have a charge target, which then zoops them up the board a bit more. Zoops isn't a word. I was going for zooms and zips. Yeah, it zooms them up the board a bit more. Anyway, so that means you want to keep your Scout Sentinels back. But if you keep them back, then they can't use that heavy flamer, and so now you have got attacks unit. The difference is, if you've got Scout Sentinels with las cannons, if you want to turn 1 deny deep strike, push them forward. Great. If there's no opportunity for them to do that, and they're just going to be a liability, keep them back. Suddenly you've got 3 las cannons, low priority to your opponent, because, well, they've got tank commanders, battles, and other things they're going to want to deal with. So you've got these 3 las cannons which can just plink away every single turn. Now, I have used my Scout Sentinels with las cannons in several games so far, and every single game they've lived to the end, and every single game they've fired their 3 shots every single time. And so they're getting like 15 las cannon shots a turn. Now you're getting 7, 8 hits every game with that. And that means that realistically you're getting about 4 through, and you're doing quite a bit of damage. I killed over the course of a game, I killed a baby knight with them. Over the course of a game, I picked up, a couple of inserts here and there. They help finish off an eradicator, they help finish off a redemptive dreadnought, all this kind of stuff. So I actually really like my Scout Sentinel with las cannons now. I think it makes them a lot more versatile. It means that they can do their intended role of pushing deep strikers back, or if that's not something that's taking place in the game, you can keep them back, and then they can just supplement your firepower. At least they're doing something every game. So for me, those are the recommended loadouts. Heavy Flamer is still good, but I would say that the las cannon is the big brain move on the Scout Sentinels. Now, I know some people will want to talk about the other weapon loadouts, but let me just quickly address why I don't think either of the other weapon loadouts make the cut. Multi-laser, it used to be that it was the cheapest weapon, now it costs the same as a las cannon. Its damage output is low, its rate of fire is low, overall it's just a bad weapon, don't take the multi-laser. The autocannon, likewise, it has a very low rate of fire, it doesn't have great strength, its AP is basically negligible thanks to Arm of Contempt. Its damage is okay, but there are plenty of sources of other damage too in your Guard army. You've got all the plasma, all the heavy bolters. Autocannon unfortunately doesn't make the cut. The plasma cannon potentially could be good, but it's a little bit swingy on the number of shots, the fact that it only gets D3, and also the fact that plasma not overcharged is a little bit weak. In fact, I can't remember the last time I didn't overcharge my plasma, even when it was at the risk of killing my own guys, because I didn't have any reroll 1s or anything. Just plasma, I think there are better sources of plasma in your army than the Sentinel, and so that's why I wouldn't take it. Missile launcher, I think, just gets outshone by the las cannon. I mean, the main damage of a missile launcher comes from the crack missile. In that case, why wouldn't you just take a las cannon? Las cannon's got better strength, better AP. Now, you might say that the missile launcher is more varied, but honestly, Guard does not struggle with sources of like strength 3, strength 4 firepower that you're going to get from that frag missile. Okay, a las gun on a guardsman is going to do reliably more damage than that missile launcher in frag mode, okay? And you have a lot of las guns. So why would you... Yeah, therefore it just makes sense. Neither mode is doing anything good. Therefore, you might as well just take the best of the two modes and up it, which means crack missile becomes las cannon. Simple as that. So that sort of addresses all the other loadouts that you can take. Sentinel chainsaw, don't bother with it. And a hunter killer missile is a maybe. If you've got 15 points left at the end of the game, I'd slap a hunter killer missile on top of your sentinels. But that's all we've got time for today. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you have, please consider giving it a like and a subscribe and a comment and all that kind of good stuff. And if you really enjoyed today's video, then please consider becoming a channel member or Patreon supporter. And I just want to say a massive thank you to all of the latest channel members. So a huge thank you to Crispy, Gunner NWP, Apathetic 11B, Cap Bryce, Greg Shimmin, B Keefe, Mr. Derp, Jared Kirkland, Gizzy376, Jacob Dale, Matt Wright, and Anthony Pappuccino, and Timmy the Elf. Massive thank you to all of you guys. Really appreciate you doing your part. And I also want to say a big thank you to the latest Patreon supporters. So massive thank you to KD4, Dominic Griffin, Frost Den, James Carroll, Zed Sylvia 51, Brian Jones, Kevin Morgan, Marshall, Ven Diesel, and Museum Fremen. Thank you guys. And I also want to say a big thank you to our top tier Patreon supporters. A heartfelt, honest, massive 07 to all of these guys. These are the War Masters. The people that have truly gone above and beyond the Call of Duty. The people that have just absolutely smashed it and just... Their support is quite frankly very humbling. So massive thank you to Navy Veteran, Philip French, Ross Miller, Tekwal, Alex Stengal, John Stubbs, Nicholas Walsh, Swordfish Trombone, Diesel Fox, Tom Sutton, and of course, August Varney. Thank you guys. But that's all we've got time for today. Thank you for watching, and of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.